Alright, Halloween's finally over with, which means two things. Number one, that shitty ass movie, thank God, is gone and dead forever, let's hope. And number two, we're gonna be Michael Myers and butcher up the fuck out of Thanksgiving, which means we're gonna kill it, just like the turkey, and we're gonna replace it with Christmas. Because fuck, it's already Christmas at my goddamn house. It's already Christmas every fucking where. You go everywhere, it's ho ho ho. Literally, the day after fucking Halloween, I saw them putting up Christmas decorations in my mall, which got me thinking, what type of Christmassy games am I going to talk about this year? Hell, as I'm recording this right now, I ain't got a fucking clue. So what comes after this monologue, hell, it will even surprise me. I guess I'll find out in editing. But I was almost thinking games that turn 20 years old, which there's quite a few of them. Kind of coincides with the PS Classic release, throwing some of those games on there. Fuck it, that's what I might do. Well, maybe not exclusively, but hey, I'm gonna dig deep into Santa's sack. I'm gonna pull out some fucking good-ass games that we played about 20 some odd years ago. That seems like a good place to start. Why not? Gran Turismo officially turns 20 years old this year, or already has. But when this game came out back in 1998, people didn't really know what to think about it, but they knew they liked the game. It was a different concept versus any other racing game that was out at the time, or anything that's been trying to compete ever since. I think Forza is about the only one that's really, you could say, is kind of toe-to-toe with what they were trying to do, or what they are trying to do, which is create the most realistic racing simulation possible. Everything from the car selection to qualifying races, that was new to me. I mean, the car selection where I've never heard of any of these cars, or should I say, I never thought I would see these cars in a racing game. Like, I don't know, like simple Hondas, things like that. Like a car that you find driving on the street as opposed to, your bedroom poster car, which was like your $300,000 Lamborghini or something like to that nature. So, I mean, Gran Turismo really broke a lot of barriers in that respect, but also at the same time, it was realistic. You couldn't just drive around on this game without hitting the brake pedal, or else you just crash into the wall. And different cars had different physics. Like if you had a front-end car with front-end wheels that did most of the driving, it would handle a lot differently. Like if you had a rear wheel vehicle, like let's say a Corvette, it would handle differently. The suspension would be different, and you'd have to drive the car in almost a totally different way. Not only that, acceleration speeds were different, gear ratios were different. It felt like every car had a personality, which at the time it really lacked. Probably the only game that somewhat rivaled it at the time was Test Drive, which Test Drive originally started out with this concept, but by about 98, when here's another game that came that's about 20 years old, Test Drive 5, by the time that game came out, it's lost its actual, what I call, realism to it. It wasn't really Test Drive anymore. It was more Test Drive with arcade. Kind of the same thing that what happened with the original Need for Speed. The original Need for Speed on the 3DO was realistic like this. Then they ported it, and they made it more arcade-like, so it was more friendly, and blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, this was the first game to really break out of that mold yet again, but do it with a different twist. Do it with cars that you could actually afford, you can actually buy, and chances are, some of you even own. And it's funny to actually own a vehicle that's in a video game that you can drive around, that acts just like your car, and it was a whole new experience. Not only that, but just the racing aspect of it in itself. You got the different tracks, which are some of the best made tracks for the game. You got High Speed Ring, which is obviously everybody's favorite. But I mean, you also have the qualifying race, which again I alluded to earlier. That was different. I never thought I would be, I was able to qualify like every other race. Let's say every other racing game, they start you off in last place, and you work your way up. Let's talk about graphics. Now, in terms of graphics, most PS1 games aren't going to hold up fairly well. This game is no exception, but it doesn't look as terrible as some of the other games do. So, I mean, in that regard, it's not absolutely terrible as far as the graphics were to go. It's definitely still playable and still somewhat looks pleasing. But that polygon brick didn't look too terrible, and still doesn't look too terrible to this day. So, I mean, in terms of graphics, it definitely holds up, and definitely in playability, it plays the exact same way as, let's say, one of the newer Gran Turismos out there. Or should I say, as close to it as you can. You can see the improvements from each installment of the game in terms of the physics, but it's still very much on par. Like, if you were used to playing the games, let's say the newer ones only, and you picked up this one, chances are you'll be able to play it with ease. A few things might be different, but you'll probably be able to play it with ease all the same and have no issue with it. And just to touch on one last thing about this game is the first game that I am ever aware of. You actually have a driving school that's like almost an official driving school with licenses where you have to perform specific maneuvers within specific amounts of time and at certain distances, stopping, braking, going around corners, not going off the road, and trying to do it and actually pass it. So, I mean, in that regard, it was something that was really new. Most racing games used to just plopping in the racing seat and driving and winning, and then you open up more and more and more. This game, you could do that, but you couldn't get the certain cars you wanted, you couldn't get the certain tracks you wanted unless you got your licenses for said area. So you couldn't exactly open up the game without all your licenses. So I thought that was a pretty neat odd which they did, and it's something that they still hold on to this day, and I think part of it which makes this game is very enjoyable. So this certainly was one game that definitely should have been underneath your Christmas tree in 1998. The year I got my PlayStation, I also got this game. Not a bad way to end it, right?